All right.
Hello.
Week 15
Oh, man.
of the Chairman of the Boards. 15 weeks in Tone on the long route to Tone Town.
Still on the journey.
Still on a journey. It is about the journey and not the destination, right? If you were satisfied with every pedal you had, you'd still, who knows? You'd still have rack gear from the 80s, or depending on when you were born. Which isn't bad. It could be good.
I'd still just have a single wah on the ground and not know how to use it.
Have a single wah on the ground. One of the things I was thinking about the other day is there was this guy that had commented on this pedal board that we had built for Wendy Melvoin, who, was the guitarist in The Revolution with Prince and played, Purple Rain. And some guy's like, this pedal board is like way too complicated. Why don't you just go back to kind of the way that it used to be with guitar players like Jimi Hendrix? And I was thinking about this. And I was thinking, okay, in the day of Jimi Hendrix, right? Jimi Hendrix had a wah, he had a univibe, he had a fuzz, and he had an octave pedal. So he had 4 pedals in total. And there's only about 10 pedals in existence at this time. So if he had 40% of the total number of pedals that were in existence, that would be like having a pedal board with 500 pedals on it now, in today's pedals.
Yeah.
So is it really a good read to compare to Jimi Hendrix? Because he was like using more pedals than anybody in his day.
He had the biggest pedal board.
He had the biggest pedal board in 1968 or 1969.
Yep.
So, he had 40% of the total pedals that were out there. So just a consideration for those of you purists that are making comparisons based on the way that it used to be done in the days of yore. Just a consideration there. But with that said, I think it's a great segue into our topic of discussion today, which is Ask a Rig Builder. We've compiled questions that have come in from multiple sources, including YouTube, our Patreon, the Vertex Patreon. Maybe we should start a Chairmen Patreon too, if we consideration for the future. And also, I guess like YouTube kind of has its own like supporting membership. So we've compiled all these different questions that have come in, ranging in different topics. And we're going to go through as many as we can in the time that we have. And they're all in front of us. Maybe we can each pick one and we can start there. Who would like to go first in this Ask a Rig Builder segment?
I'm just bringing up the questions here, so I'm gonna delay here while you guys start it off.
Brian, was there a juicy one that was submitted that you want to take on first that we could all maybe converse around?
I'll do the new UA pedals actually.
Oh, you would.
I would because
I might chime in with you.
So I just messed with it last night. I messed with the Dream at home on these like really crappy studio speakers, and it sounded amazing. Dude, the crappy studio speakers. Right. So I know that this sounds amazing too.
Because the question was about what do we think about the new UA pedals?
Yeah. So, I think they sound great. I have had the chance through the store for us to try all of them. They're really good. They're really consistent. I mean, coming from a company that does plugins, there's, it's not like a company that's just taking on something new. Like, it's something that they've been doing. They're just throwing it all. Like, I love the Oxbox series. So, like, them taking that same technology and putting them in pedals, it was a no-brainer. They sound very nice and warm and lively, and I love them. I think they're great. The Dream and the Ruby are the 2 biggest sellers right now, but they are all pretty incredible.
Actually, it's funny you guys should bring this one up because literally late last week filmed a video with a good friend of mine, and we did a blind A, B, C, D. Dream, Ruby, Iridium, and ACS1, and we did a blind test to see, let's try and simulate an environment where we could get rid of all the hype of there's a new pedal on the market, it's the best thing ever, when really, like some of the overdrives out there, it's very similar to what has come before it. And so we tried to get rid of the hype, and the UA pedals, I think this podcast will be released after the video I put up, so I can give it away. The UA pedals were an absolute standout. Like, it wasn't even a question which ones were the UA pedals as far as This one sounds the most realistic. We were kind of going for, since we didn't have the actual vintage amps, which Mason, I know you've brought up in the past, or do they actually sound like the vintage amps they're trying to replicate? It was more about, does it inspire you to actually keep playing, or does it feel a little fake, a little reproduced in a negative type of way? But it was a total standout. They have done a great job. So it is interesting to see, and the quality that they have, that they put out in these plugins, and that UA does in general, is excellent. And I don't think it's any different for these pedals as well.
Yeah, I agree. Mason?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they do make good plugins, and I think that, if you've had any experience with using their amp plugins, with your Apollo or whatever it is that you would be, using to call these up on your computer before the pedals existed, I think a lot of people would say, yeah, they think they're pretty good. I think, of course, the amps themselves will be better. I think I haven't compared it in this fashion, and I haven't tried the Woodrow, which is the Tweed deluxe style, I believe. I have a real Tweed deluxe from the late 50s, but I don't have a Woodrow. So I can't make that comparison, but I can say with the Ruby, I think it sounded pretty good. I think that probably the Iridium and the ACS1 are probably not the best comparison points for that sort of processing power. The comparison I really want to see is like how like the Neural would do against it, because that one is kind of more on par with like where it's a software company that's really taken a lot of time to develop amp simulations, whereas like Walrus and Strymon are not. They don't have a pedigree of designing DSP for amplifier simulations that have been going on for 10 or more years. Yeah. UA has been doing this. It's probably one of the earliest companies in existence to be doing this stuff. So they have a lot of experience, and they have a lot of people that really know what they're doing behind the scenes, that are doing all of the programming and the creation of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see how something like the Neural would compare to something like that has really good high quality engineers that have done this for a number of years. Yeah. And I would say they are very good. I would say the other comparison is like, would a reissue or a Hot Rod Deluxe sound more realistic mic than it. I understand there's a convenience of the pedal. But I think overall, I think if you're going for a simulated amp sound, I think it's great. I think that the challenge is that I still think for most people you have to kind of settle on one, because realistically you're not going to buy a Fender version, a Vox version, and then I'm sure at some point they'll come out with a Marshall version. What are you gonna? They're how much are they each? 400?
They're $399. Yeah, they're $400. They're
so 400 each.
They're pricey, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, to get all three sounds, it's $1,200. Still cheaper than, of course, buying those three amps. But you can sometimes get a Hot Rod Deluxe for $400 on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. Sometimes, I don't know, man. I mean, I have a hard time with the digital amps anyway, so I'm probably the wrong guy to ask.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Our whole point of the test was, if you have a single pedal slot on your board for an amp, these are the ones that are currently the most popular. So I was curious about that. And I mean, the whole thought has to be, like you're saying, started with, this isn't an amp replacement necessarily. It's not going to do the exact same thing. It's one of the tools you can have in your toolbox. And for certain scenarios, it's unbelievably convenient. But my biggest test, and I've said this before, is still in a live setting with a band, does it feel like a real amp? And I haven't been able to do that test yet with these. But I've never found an amp sim that passes that test, that feels like you're moving air, you get the touch sensitivity, all that type of stuff. And I haven't been able to do it with the UA yet, so I honestly don't know. I would be surprised, though, if the UA stuff feels really good in a live setting and like a real amp.
Yeah, well, I'm testing the Dream, like, this is how much I don't play when I'm not here. I do not play guitar almost at all, except the day before I have to play a set, or like on a Sunday at church. So like last night I had to make myself sit down after my kids were asleep. And like we did all of our house, like cleaned up the house and sat down, plugged it in, stock. I think I did the very first preset, everything at noon, and I just like strummed the chord, and I was like, oh wow, that was like I was surprised. So like from the standpoint of like, does it beat an amp? It does. Like an amp is always gonna be better. Like we just got this gorgeous 2-rock with a 212 cabinet, blue sway. Like it is pure magic and gorgeous. Would I love to take that to play somewhere? Absolutely, but I'm not gonna lug it around because it's so heavy, personally, and tubes and everything. Right now, I know tubes are crazy. So, but yeah, no, I would say the same thing. I have not done a live test. I've only done the studio speaker test. So I'm actually gonna hopefully film a little video of what it sounds like live and in a band. And I was actually inspired last night to kind of play. I played for like maybe 45 minutes, and it was just tweaking, like messing around. And I didn't even have any guitar pedals on except the Dream and like a reverb. Like I didn't have any overdrive on, had a nice breakup. So like it was nice to be inspired to keep playing. Like usually I'm just like, okay, I'm bored, turn it all off, go watch Netflix or something. But
it should probably be noted that a rig builder playing guitar for 45 minutes is like 6 hours for a guitar player.
it really is.
Yeah. If we're gonna
It's like dog years.
Exactly.
It really is. I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I look at my stuff and I'm like, I don't want to. I should play. No.
That's funny, man.
All right.
Grant, do you see? Are we sufficiently satisfied that we've answered the question of our thoughts on UA pedals?
I think so.
Grant, do you see one on the list of questions that we may want to tackle?
Well, I did have one, and it's around the Strymon pedals.
Yeah,
the new Strymon pedals.
Mhm.
So for anyone who hasn't heard about the news, basically Strymon has re-released some of their key small box pedals with MIDI and a couple of extra features. Essentially, new front end, I think, is what they're saying. JFET
They've
front
always,
end.
yeah.
I don't know if that's actually changed or if they're just highlighting it or not. Maybe they only added MIDI but needed a couple more lines of copy. I don't know. Either way, they look impressive. And the other cool thing that I was chatting to a buddy about yesterday is you can get the conduit, their kind of MIDI splitter, hook up a whole bunch of up to 4 of these new Strymon pedals, and you can also connect them all to Nixie, so you can edit them on your computer. The MIDI goes both ways, all that type of thing. So I don't know your guys' thoughts, if you guys think this is actually worthwhile or if it's maybe a bit of a gimmick. But I personally was pretty excited to see it. I think MIDI on some of these pedals from a rig building point of view, it's always one of the first things that comes up. It's like, I love my El Cap, but it's in this MIDI setup and I want to do the one-touch changes, and this won't allow me to have the same flexibility. And so from a building point of view and what customers have asked me for, it's huge, because the El Cap sounds much better than the El Cap equivalent settings on the timeline. And it's just not the same. You aren't going to get the same tonal quality. So it is a different sound for those people saying just get a timeline and use, the tape setting on there or something like that. But so I'm actually pretty excited about it. I think it's well worth it, and I'm curious to see how much or how many of the old Strymon small box without MIDI pedals now get flooded onto the market. And maybe if you don't care, you might be able to get one for a steal, because there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I think get them for a steal, because I think there's some of them that that didn't. I'm not saying that it was a bad idea, but like the Lex, I think other than the only thing I could see really needing to do with MIDI that it doesn't already do is like having a way to, ramp up or ramp down the rotation. And so, this would allow you to do it. But for most people historically, when I'm, if they're using a Leslie effect and a MIDI controller, maybe they'll designate an expression pedal so that they can do the ramp up, ramp down in terms of the speed and just connect the expression to the speed. I don't know if that one has a lot of value for MIDI, but I mean, I'm sure
someone will find a use.
So I'm sure somebody will, but I'm sure it's limited. But I think on things like the El Capistan, I could see where that would be valuable. Flint, I guess, could be valuable because I know a lot of people purport that, again, sort of equivalent settings on Big Sky or on Blue Sky, trying to do a spring sound, it doesn't really sound the same as the Flint. The Flint seems to has its own unique cult following. And I think it would be cool on that one in particular to be able to change between the plate or the spring or be able to change the different tremolo types. I think that would be, I could see the value on the Flint. I can see the value on the El Capistan. I don't really see the value on the Lex. What were the other ones?
Blue Sky, Dig.
Blue Sky. I guess I could see it on
Deco.
Oh yeah.
Is that the Deco?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think some of them maybe were more valuable than others. I don't know. I mean, they certainly all had analog front ends before. I don't know, how they were doing that, whether that was, a JFET or what one of the many ways that you can get to a quality result. But, I think that they were, I would presume that they were being sincere when they said people were asking for that. I'm sure that they were.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's a good thing, adding more features. I hopefully they sound the same. I would expect they would.
Yeah. And Brian, are they the same price point? Do you know? You guys probably have them over there, don't you?
They call them the legacy, the old ones. I guess whatever you want to call it. Are $299. These are like $379.
Okay, so almost $100.
Yeah. So I've always said when they come out with a MIDI Flint, I would go back to a Flint because I love the Flint and I have a Big Sky. I've had a lot of different reverbs. There's always just been something about the Flint that I've always just really liked.
And everybody says that. I know so many people that just love the Flint. I'm not saying I just like it. But
I've never connected with it.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'm on the other end of the spectrum.
I don't know why. I think it's because in the midst of how complex and some of these rigs that like we all do, sometimes simple just sounds really nice. Maybe that's a big part of it. Or that's like what I've always had such a pull towards like the RV5 or RV6 is because of how simple it was. That's why like the UA reverb actually is appealing to me because it's like 2 presets. Like I only use 2 presets. Some of these boards I do have like 30 or 40 different reverb presets and like patches loaded up. I'm like, do you actually use all these? And they're like, oh yeah, totally. All more power to them. I'm just so simple.
I just want to know, if they're playing at church, they get to play 40 songs during.
No. Mason, they use 8 reverbs per song.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's the difference.
Oh yes.
Well, as we know, Jesus big fan of reverb.
Exactly. In the cave, you gotta have all that cave reverb there. Yep.
Right. He was, and I always suspected he was a reverb before delay kind of guy, but I don't know. You guys have different.
Maybe. Yeah, I would say the Flint, like, we haven't physically got them. I think they're in transit to be here or whatever, so, like, we haven't actually gotten them to be able to play on them. Right. I know I have a lot of, like, people that, like, I'll do, like, that LCAT, or me or other people will do, like, the LCAT tap tempo mod. And so they can still use that favorite jack on the back, but still do like a clock. Just coughing over here. So having that MIDI capability is going to be really nice because I don't really like doing that mod. Especially when people want to use it with their quartz. The Lex, I mean, they're all great stuff. The funny thing about it is that when the video came out, they were talking about they added these extra knobs, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know it ever had these features." But these extra knobs, like the reverb on the L cap, has always been there. It was just like a secondary preset.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Like, I literally looked at my coworker. I was like, "It has reverb?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Where was that?" He goes, "Well, it's in the menu. It's in like the second." I'm like, I literally had no idea. So like stuff like that is cool because you'll have some people that will read through every little thing that the pedal can do on the manual, and which is fine. But some people like me, I'm literally just gonna set it down, get the sound I like, and like if I really want to dive into it, I will. So it's cool to see that they put all those pedals and their parameters on the front side of it, and they are doing a whole thing with Nixie, so I'm excited about that because Nixie is very outdated, and it doesn't always work, so it'll be a nice upgrade.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it.
Mm.
All right.
Let me look at these questions here. How about we get into a techie one? How about where should I put my noise gate with my effects loop? I'm assuming they mean effects loop amp. Maybe we'll just talk about noise gates for a second.
Let's do it.
So with noise gates, there are several different versions of noise gate. There are kind of like the Boss noise suppressor style, or the TC Electronic Century, or a decimator, where I think the G-string version, where it has 4 jacks. It has an input, an output, and then a send and return. And then there's other versions where there's just an input and an output, like a MXR Smart Gate. And then there's versions like the Fortin Zool, where it has an input and an output, and then a key input, which is like kind of like a feeder input that you'll use to kind of break off from the guitar input to kind of help it with its ability to track and properly gate things when there isn't any input signal coming through. And actually, I have some diagrams from a couple of times ago, and I'm just trying to locate them because I think that they might help for those of you who are watching through YouTube. If you're listening, we'll do the best we can to describe what it is that we're showing you. All right, so let's start with kind of like the Boss NS2 and the decimator, or the Century style, where it's got 4 connections. So if you have an effects loop, let me just find the right one here that actually has an effects loop.
And correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't the decimator, aren't there 2 versions? There's like one with the effect, with that extra send and return, and one that's just in out, right?
Yeah, there's one that's in out, and then there's one that has the extra set. So here's one version here. I'm gonna share my screen, and you'll see. All right, here's the decimator. All right, so in this example, you can see the guitar comes into the input of the decimator right over here. So guitar comes into decimator input. And this, again, would be the same of the NS2. This would be the same of the Century, any 4 jack version of a noise gate. And then the output, or sorry, the input of the guitar comes into the input of the output of the guitar comes into the input of the decimator. The send of the decimator goes into the input of the amp. And pictured here, I have the input of a Soldano SLO. Then the effects send from the amplifier goes into the return of the decimator. And then the output of the decimator feeds your wet effects. And here I have a delay from JHS and a reverb from TC Electronic. And then that comes into the return. And in this fashion, you're gating the preamp section of the Soldano because the guitar's coming into it. The send is feeding the input of the Soldano amp, just like it was the input of the pedal. And then the send of the effects loop is like the output of the pedal, kind of treating the input and the send as an input and output jack of a pedal that you want to gate around so that it reduces the noise. If you were going to add pedals to this, like distortion pedals in front of the amp, and you wanted to include those, you'd put them right after the send, and you'd put them between the send and the input of the amp, and they would also be included in that gate. So that's how you would do it with that style. And then I think I also have one. Okay, so let's pretend that you don't have an amp with an effects loop, just in case you're that person, because I have a diagram for that too. So I'll share my screen again. And again, we'll do our best for those of you who are just watching or just listening instead of watching. So here's the same exact effect, the G-string decimator, but again, this could be an NS2, this could be a TC Electronic Century. Guitar comes into the input. The send is going to feed all of your noise-related pedals. So this would be any overdrives, distortions, anything that's adding noise floor. Typically, I would leave modulation pedals out of this, even if they may add some noise. I kind of reserve this for stuff that's really increasing the noise floor. The output of the last sort of effect that you want to be gated will go into the return, and then the output will feed your time-based pedals before going into the front of the amp. So you're basically treating the send and return of the noise gate as like whatever the noise pedals are that you want to reduce the noise on that are increasing the noise floor, you loop those into the send and return.
Yeah.
And then if you have one that's just like a smart gate that just has an input and output, you would generally put those after the last of the sort of overdrive or distortion pedals, or if you were using it in a loop, you'd put it after the send. And the Zool, which has got that key input, I'll just show that as a last example that has the key input. So the guitar would come in, and I've shown here a Sir buffer splitter, but really any splitter would work. I know a lot of people use like a Boss tuner here because it's got a output that's active all the time, because there's like two outputs on a Boss tuner. So you could use that. It's not, of course, a great buffer or a great splitter, in my opinion, and it's not isolated, but you could use it if you needed to. But anyway, so guitar comes into your buffer splitter, whatever it is. One side goes to the key input of the Zool. The other side feeds whatever your effects are that are going in front of the amp, and then feeds the input of the amp. The effects send out of the back of the amp feeds the input of the Zool. The output of the Zool feeds your wet effects and then goes into the return. So in essence, it's really just coming after the effects send, but before any of your time-based effects. And then the purpose of the input splitter is just to feed it a key input so that it always knows kind of, it's able to better sense and track if the guitar is not activated, so it knows when to kind of shut the gate, so to speak, so that you don't have any of that noise coming through. And I think you can just adjust the threshold with the knob there. So those are a few different ways beyond what was asked in the actual question about just the effects loop option. You have a couple different ideas of how you could do the noise gate.
So thinking as, let's pretend I am the guitar player, the customer, come into you guys, the rig builders, and saying I have a noisy rig. How do I know if I should use a noise gate or not? What would you guys tell them?
Well, I would typically ask, like, it kind of depends on how many dirt pedals and the guitar you're using too, because you may get a really noisy Strat, but then you may have some with single coils, and then someone with humbuckers isn't as noisy. So you're noticing, oh wow, with these pedals, this guitar is really noisy. So sometimes I'll suggest, okay, well maybe a noise gate for just when you use that guitar. And you guys can correct me if you disagree. I have a coworker. He's like, it's really noisy with only this guitar, but my other guitars is totally fine. I'm okay, well, you don't have to get rid of all those other pedals that you like. They all react really nicely. It's just that one guitar might just be really noisy. So, I mean, I kind of just ask what kind of gear are they using, what exactly, like, are you playing in an environment where you have to, where it's 0 to 100, or are you playing like where you're in a church where sometimes it's quiet and but you're buzzing, or what? So I kind of just assess the situation of where they're playing, what gear they're using, and kind of go from there.
Nice. What about you, Mason? What would you tell them in terms of when it's a good idea to use a noise gate, or maybe it's something else entirely?
Well, I would say usually if you're using a high gain channel switching amp with an effects loop, there could be a reason to use it. And I think some of it has to do with environment, but I would say more typically it has to do with the person's tolerance. And a lot of people that are coming from Axe Effects or Kemper or some of the digital area of amplifier simulation, and then they're coming to tube amps and pedals, often have a lot less tolerance for noise because a lot of those systems do have gates on them already or do things to treat the noise. And so they're not used to hearing amps at volume. They're not used to playing amps at volume, like in front of it, having a 412 in front of them. And they find that it's a lot noisier than they expected. And they had this, they're used to, a pretty minimal noise floor. And to me, playing single coil pickups and vintage Fender amps predominantly, I probably have a higher tolerance for it than other people are. I have a higher tolerance, but with a baseline of like what would be expected for this, and like what can be chalked up to the guitar, and what can be chalked up to something noisy in the rig. I would say that every noise gate is going to have some impact on the sound, irrespective of which one you use. And it's just like what's tolerable for you. I think if you're using a super high gain amp and you have it set to a lot of gain, there could be a case to be made to use the noise gate to kind of make it a little bit, nicer to interact with. I try to use them as judiciously as possible, but I can also see that there could be uses for them. Typically for me, if you've set stuff up right, you can probably get away with not using one. In overdrives, for the most part, pedals don't seem to. I mean, they're going to add noise floor, of course, but I think it's within the realm of what's expected. I typically really just think of it as something that I would use with an amp that's really high gain and that you need to kind of help tame it down a little bit. If it's a guitar related issue like 60 cycle hum, I would say my before using a noise gate, my preference would be either to install like a silent backplate system, like Sir does that for a lot of their guitars, and then I think their technology was licensed by another company called Ilyich, and they create like these pick guards and backplates that have like a reverse coil, and they add a little bit more output to your pickups because it's like additional winding. But it will resolve any of the, or a lot of the hum that would normally be associated with single coil pickups. So I would recommend people would do that before getting a noise gate, because the noise gate will be consequential to the tone in some way. Or you could try using noiseless pickups, and those are not as, they don't sound as good as a lot of the standard single coil pickups. But I think the best of the noiseless to me are the DiMarzio area, pickups, like the Area 58 or the Area 61 and the Area 69. I think that those are pretty good noiseless single coil pickups that are very close to what you'd get, but maybe not exactly the same.
I still remember being at like a stadium size event, and the guitar player was having so much bad interaction, I assumed from lighting, and front of house had to put a gate on his whole guitar signal. And it was so bad that when he was playing lighter lines, like unless he dug into the guitar, his guitar signal was just cutting in and out over and over again. It's just gut. Like it just wasn't working well at all, because he was having so much of this noise from his single coils. He was playing a Strat. And ever since then, whenever someone brings up noise gate, and this is not fair, I will say, but whenever someone brings up like, oh, I think I might want to use a noise gate, I try and fix the other problem that's causing the noise, if possible, first. Because I just always have, like, as soon as I hear gate in my head, I have this horrible memory of let's avoid gates and use them as a last resort, if possible, and try and fix it from there. But speaking of like questions along this line that we get from customers, One of the most common ones I get is my rig is noisy. How do I fix it?
Mhm.
And the first test I get people to run to try and start figuring out what's causing some of this noise is when they're playing in that noisy environment. Usually it's a venue or a spot on stage. They can really, like when I'm playing on this side, it's horrible. And I'll get them to plug in their rig as if they were about to start playing, and then just go 100% to 0 on their volume pot on their guitar. And 9 times out of 10, their rig is dead silent when their guitar is in the off position. I'm like, all right, well, now it sounds like you might have some lighting interference or something coming in through your pickups. It's probably a single coil guitar. And like, yep, it is. And so, switch it out for something with humbuckers if that's an option. Or find that point on stage. If you turn in a 360 degrees on stage with your guitar on, you're going to find a quiet spot. Just don't move. Just find that position, face directly backwards.
Put a little
if
gaff
you need
tape
to.
down.
Exactly.
Right.
Face this way. Little neon arrow on stage. But yeah, it's pretty frustrating. And other than the back plates, like you're saying, or switching guitars, I haven't come up with a really satisfactory fix for lighting, like the big magnets on the back of some of these lights on stage that just are horrible for single coil guitars. I say we go on a get rid of lighting strike and let's just play in the dark for the sake of good tone. But I haven't had many supporters so far. Maybe you guys have a better solution for me.
Don't plug in your power in the same...
I think we lost you, Brian.
Oh.
You muted yourself, Brian.
Did I? No. Okay, there we
you
go.
are. There you are.
Sorry about that. Mine would be don't plug your power for your board into the same strip as the lighting. That's one, because for me, because we're a part of a church plant, we're kind of sharing power across. So all the lighting will be on a couple power reels or whatever, and then audio will be on a separate one. I just try to avoid that as much as possible. There are some people that say, oh, you can get this to plug it in. I've tried those HumXs. I've tried all sorts of different things. I know HumX is meant for for different reasons, but I've tried a lot of you could try this. And it just comes down to just don't share power with something like that. It's just not a good idea.
Nice. I know I've still gotten issues even on separate audio and lighting power. I've still gotten pretty bad lighting interference in the past. And I literally, depending on the venue, I just had to pick a spot to face and try not to move too much. It was good. Would you suggest using those pick guard, what you're mentioning from Sir?
Yeah, Sir or Ilyich, they're both, Sir I don't think sells theirs as a separate thing, so I think Ilyich is kind of your only option. And I think now they have versions, I'll look on their site, but I'm fairly certain now they actually have versions that are even less invasive. I'm just so Ilyich hum canceling systems is what they're called.
It is one of the biggest frustrations, especially after you've invested all this money into your rig. You've got the guitar, you've got the sound you want, you plug it in for the first time, and you've got this just hanging out in the background.
Yeah.
And so if this is you and you have experienced it, you are definitely not alone. And sometimes there isn't an extremely easy and quick fix, but there are ways to reduce it, which obviously Mason's chatting about right now with the pick guards and stuff.
Yeah, so it looks like now they actually have versions that you can just install. It looks like maybe there's something up with their website, like their hosting service is kind of is having some complications, but I'll just share my screen for those of you who are watching. So it looks like now you can just install the coil into the cavity of your guitar, and there's little there's some little trimmer pots I think on this that you can kind of trim out the noise. Let's see if I can get some better images. Yeah, so like you can kind of see this guy in the corner here, where you can kind of trim out some of the noise based on this, and so you can kind of set your threshold of, you know, almost like a similar to how a noise gate might work. And it gives you a little bit more.
So there's probably still some compromises that need to be made. Hey.
Well, I think that the thing that I remember, I haven't specifically tried this version, but I had tried some on a Shure guitar once, or so when Shure used to sell them, I had tried one on another guitar that somebody had that I knew had, and I remember the thing that we noticed is that it added more output to the pickups because there's more coil. So if you had, let's say, and I'm trying to think about it in terms of like Shure pickups because that's what he used. If he had a Shure V60, he would want to go to like the next less underwound pickup.
Yep.
If you're going to add the coil, because once you add the extra coil of the single or the silent backplate, it kind of pushed you back up to where you were, because it's like adds, I don't know, 5% more winding or something like that.
Yeah.
So there was like a compensation that you could do, but also like some of the pickup manufacturers that make custom pickups, like Lindy Fralin, you could always tell him like, okay, make me a blue special, but I want it 5% underwound because I'm going to be adding in this Ilyich black backplate. So that's just like something to keep in mind. If you are going to add it, just know that it will add a little, it'll make your pickup slightly hotter.
Good to know. That's something I've never installed. I haven't tried it, but it's a good thing to have up my sleeve for recommendations. So
yeah,
good call.
Yeah, and I think now they make it for pretty much every variety of single coil, whether it's, you know, a P90 or, you know, just a Strat pickup, tele pickups, etc. So something for everybody.
Love it.
What else should we kind of got into noise gates? Any other questions here that we want to get into next?
Yeah, I want to do the NAMM one.
Okay.
Oh,
I think that'd be a fun one.
Hot topic.
The question is, did you guys go to NAMM, and what was best in show? So I haven't been to NAMM in a couple of years, but when I did go years ago, you know, it I think it was a little bit hotter, you know, a little bit more everyone, you know, a lot more vendors, a lot more, you know, pre-pandemic stuff. So, but from hearing of my boss going and some friends going, you know, they talked, you know, there was a lot less vendors there. That was a big thing. A lot less people, a lot smaller. So, and the best in I mean, I can't speak on what was best in show. I mean, there was a lot of like a cool new, like, you know, modulation pedals from a few companies. I don't know if it was, you guys can chime in too. Cause I think Grant, did you send some guys?
Yeah, David went. So the guy, David, who does all our setups in America, he went down with David Hislop.
Okay, cool.
And did a couple sessions and interviews and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like I know that there are some companies that they didn't show at all just because.
Some big names.
Yeah, like big ones. Like, and a lot of the guitar ones didn't go too, which was interesting.
I mean, Omilion Audio wasn't even there this year.
Oh my gosh, not even.
Unbelievable.
I wouldn't even know what to do. I would love to go. I think it would be fun to go one year. I remember the last time I went, it was Nashville, and for whatever reason, I wore jeans and like a long sleeve like button up because like we had to look nice, and it was so hot. It was like over 100 degrees, and we had to walk like 4 blocks to get to the convention center, and it was the worst thing ever. And I always remember, I'm only ever going back to Anaheim after this because that weather was so much nicer. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't have a lot of best in show because not a lot of people, like, I could be wrong, but not a lot of people posted. There were, you know, oh, that's a cool guitar, or oh, there's a new signature model. But I mean, it seems like everyone has kind of caught on to the like the oh, like we don't need NAMM kind of thing. That
Everyone's
could be
releasing outside of NAMM.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, there's a couple companies that they release stuff like a week before, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. Are you gonna be there? Like, no, we're not gonna be there. That's why we're releasing it. We get a better turnout through social media than we do going to the trade show. So that could be a whole nother podcast, but that's personally what I say. What about you guys?
Well, I mean, David went, as you said, and he honestly went probably more with, he hadn't been before, down to Anaheim to NAMM, and he went more with the goal of just hanging out with people, making connections, going out to, after parties and dinners and stuff like that. And so honestly, we didn't really chat too much about the actual showroom floor. We chatted a whole lot more about did you have a good time meeting up with these people? Who are some of the new people that you met that you didn't know were around? Like all that type of stuff. And it was really all about the relationship side of things.
Yeah.
And so we had some great wings, some great beer, met some great people, but we didn't really chat too much about the pedals. And we did talk about firstly, was it worth it? Do you think, where's this leading? What are your gut feelings about NAMM next year? And it's really hard to I guess justify a huge showroom floor investment with a post-pandemic NAMM.
Yeah.
And so I know we're starting this question with best in show, but yeah, it was really everyone's releasing their pedals through Instagram. They're releasing it through their website, making great, reinvesting the money they may have put into NAMM into Maris, the LVX, this epic video they put out for it that would have been expensive to make. But I saw that on Instagram, I'm hooked. I don't even know what the pedal does. I saw the video they did, and I want it.
Yep.
It was just this picture of this girl out in this big landscape, these interstellar soundtrack type vibes. Yep, you're speaking to me. And I don't know if there was even a conversation. I don't even know if they were at NAMM. But that type of thing that you can now do on socials and people have been forced to do on socials through COVID, it's kind of pushed NAMM out to the side. And so many other things in life now, it's we actually don't need to travel to do this. We can figure out potentially a better, more efficient workaround now that we all kind of have learned how to do this during COVID. I mean, we're doing this on Zoom right now. 5 years ago, we probably wouldn't have. We would be doing this a different way. But now, due to COVID, life has changed. And I think NAMM is, for better or for worse, probably for worse, seeing the results of that. And so I didn't answer the question at all, but I think the best in show for NAMM were probably companies that weren't at NAMM.
Yeah. Mason, I don't think you went, right?
No. Well, I think there's a few things that we need to just name about NAMM for those people who are unfamiliar with sort of the pricing and things of that nature. In terms of what it costs for a manufacturer, and you guys can chime in if you have different information. But the last time I went, I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe a year before the pandemic was the last one that I did. And I think a booth for a 10 by 10, which is the smallest, I guess there is a smaller size, but it's kind of you're in the dungeon, which is the downstairs area, and you have a picnic table that you set up on.
Oh my gosh.
If you want just a legitimate booth
on the showroom floor.
On the showroom floor, I think it's about $10,000 for the space. And then everything is extra. If you want carpet, that's
Power,
an extra,
everything.
$400 a day. And if you want somebody to clean and vacuum the carpet, that's another $100 a day. And if you want power, that's another $200 a day. And so it's kind of everything is a la carte. Nothing in the booth is free. You want curtain dividers, that's $100 a day, and it's per day of the show. And also, if you have a booth that requires any assembly for any of the people that you see that have, I don't know, plywood that they've, outfitted, different sorts of lighting fixtures and things like that, that needs to be assembled by the unionized crew for the trade show. And I'm not, speaking about unions as being a problem, but I think it's a consideration that maybe is not something that's considered by everybody up front. And you're having to pay, an hourly rate for, a group of, unionized workers you can't assemble it yourself, in other words. So I think some people come there and they're surprised when they show up with their booth in 16 pieces that they've kind of, thought creatively about how to make it efficient to assemble, and they can't touch it. You have to have their guys do it and disassemble it. And so I think ultimately for a 10 by 10 booth, you're probably looking somewhere between all travel expenses, hotel, Airbnb, whatever it is. For a 10 by 10, I think you're looking at minimum of probably 15,000, I would say. And I think in the days when there wasn't internet marketing that was prevalent in our industry, I could see where there would be value for companies, especially smaller companies that didn't have a way to reach a lot of dealers or a lot of people at once. And I think that it was good for them to have some exposure, especially for the people who were down in the dungeon, which I'm calling sort of the basement area, because that was like kind of like your cheapest entry. You could get a lot of exposure, and there was definitely some gems that you could find down there of like companies that were sort of like in their embryonic stages that were down there. And, it used to be that like when I went to NAMM as a kid in the 90s, people would have these like back rooms to their showroom or their little, showroom floor where, they would take vendors and they would write orders for the year, and that's where they did their business because it wasn't done all through email and stuff like that. But the fashion of the show has not evolved very much, given how much things have changed in the industry and how people actually do business. And so I think NAMM is kind of holding on to the inertia of the 80s and 90s and the credibility that the convention had. And they haven't evolved it to the way people do business now. And so I think that a lot of companies were afraid in terms of the optics of not showing up to NAMM and how that would affect their business. And then through the pandemic, they got their opportunity to actually see what it looked like not going to NAMM and having that extra budget to now reinvest in other marketing avenues that were presumably digital. And I think a lot of them saw that it didn't affect their business adversely the way that they were concerned that it might and didn't want to take the risk, and then NAMM just forced their hand. Or the pandemic forced their hand because there wasn't a NAMM for a certain amount of time, or it was like digital NAMM or whatever it was. And I think people learn that, you can post reels on Instagram or whatever it is. And even if you're getting 5,000 views, I can guarantee you that's more than the number of people that will come to your booth that actually have any influence or have any buying power with the brands that they represent. Because NAMM has been trying to, for years, to keep their numbers really high so they can say, we had 50,000 people a day come to the convention. But if you distill those numbers to people who are people who have, again, any power to purchase or to put an order in with you or have any influence there, it's very minimal, because NAMM keeps on, like a company like ours, right, that has fewer than 10 employees. We were getting like 50 badges because the expectation is that you're going to invite other people to come and that you're going to have other guests and things like that. And so it dilutes the convention where there's a lot of people that are not actually in the trade, because it's supposed to be a trade show. They're people that are fans and people that want to be, into the industry, but they're not there in a meaningful way to actually do business. And in companies that are paying to be there, they're there to do business, presumably. And there's not a lot of that goes on at NAMM anymore. And I think that, I think Sweetwater has kind of the best system of any kind of sort of trade show style event with their Gear Fest right now, because they understand that it's all digital. They invite creators out. They host these creators to create content about products that they carry and things that are there. And they've kind of made it a more of a multimedia experience instead of trying to hold on to this like really antiquated way of, doing a trade show. And so I think NAMM has got to evolve or they will dissolve. That's the bottom line. And if they can't do it, I think more and more people are finding it to be irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, not to mention all those expenses for the booth, like you were saying, but to pay your employees to be there, all the hotel. And I mean, I looked up pricing for what a hotel room was there, and it's insane. And all the convention food, like everything about NAMM is expensive. And I think it was one time someone was like, oh yeah, I mean, I just saved $25,000-$30,000 by not doing it. And I mean, it's a fun experience to go and get to hang out. I've never went to go hang out with friends, and it looks fun. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think back in the day when technology wasn't there, where you weren't going to get to see that quad cortex until your boss came back and talked. Like my boss, it was like I would go and I would basically order everything at the show for the year of what we were going to sell, and I would go back and I would tell my coworkers, oh yeah, they had a tap tempo delay. Like they had these, like, that's when like you told your friends this kind of stuff. Couldn't text them a picture or do a live stream. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think NAMM is on borrowed time right now. I mean, unless they make a huge shift, I don't think that it's they're long for, at least in the format that they are now. It's
gonna be like metaverse, everyone with goggles on.
Yeah, we're
talking VR tours at NAMM.
A VR
tour. You can buy a digital booth.
I want to see, like, the guy who had the VR glasses who's running, to the Seymour Duncan booth and hits a wall, in his house.
Zuckerberg's like, okay, we got this.
Yeah. How are you doing on time, Brian? I just want to be conscientious that you got to get to work here soon.
Yeah, I would say we could do one more.
One more? Is there anyone that is standing out to any of you that we could finish up our Ask a Rig Builder segment today on, of user generated, or I guess viewer generated questions? Reading,
Brian.
Same.
You got anything?
I am doing the same. This one keeps popping out, and I'm interested in knowing where these are. It says high-end power cables to power your supply. There are some that are 10 and some 100. What is the difference? When that question, is that a DC cable, or are we talking AC cable?
I'm pretty sure they're talking about the AC cable that's going from the wall into the supply.
Okay, yeah. Okay, no, I mean, that one is interesting for me because we have some HOSA technology ones that I typically cut those and I'll shorten them and do patch boxes with. But then there are some other ones that we have on the wall. They're, I think, like $100. They're expensive. I personally don't ever notice the difference. Maybe you guys do. I know some of them are a lot thicker. But anytime I make an AC cable, I do a really thick, like, cable and do connectors myself. I'm curious from you guys. I mean, I see them all the time. I thought when I read this, it said there was $100 like DC cables. Like, you're paying $100 for a DC cable. This thing better be wrapped in gold. Like,
now available on the Goodwood Audio website. I've never messed around with high-end AC cables, if I'm going to be honest. I've never gone down that road. Have you ever done it, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the claims that are made, and most of them are not rooted in any sort of like science that we can connect to anything that is known in the physical world. Yep. And I think that that's not uncommon for people to make spurious claims about their guitar cables or about their power cables and all these things. But let's just, for the purposes of today, let's pretend that every claim that a $100 IEC cable manufacturer has made. Are you still with us, Brian?
Yeah, no, I was trying to go find, because we had some up on the wall, but they are all gone.
Okay.
It's probably because no one wanted to pay $100.
But let's just pretend that everything that these guys have said about their IEC cables is true, right? you got your mains, your transformer out on the street, right? You got the line that's coming, into your house or into your studio. And then you have all the Romex and everything that's in the walls. And then it gets to your outlet. And then the last 10 feet are the best AC cable money can buy. That's like, having a Tombstone or DiGiorno frozen pizza. And then at the end, just sprinkling some really nice, Salt Bay, organic, sea salt at the end, and being like, now we got a boutique, fire, like a
Look at this
pizza oven.
pizza.
Yeah, you can't compete. The last 10 feet are this amazing cable. And the 300 feet between where your outlet is all the way back, to the street is 16 gauge or 14 gauge, just like everything in the house. I think code is 16 gauge, or at least I think here in California it is.
Yeah.
And that's just stuff that comes from Home Depot, so it's if the last 10 feet are great, is that going to overcome the 300 or 400 feet that go all the way out to the street? The answer is no. Yeah, the last 0.5% of cable is really good. Everything else is, Home Depot.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that we have to consider here is that it's not going to undo all of everything that came before it. Now, in terms of, the reliability, the robustness, like maybe it is more robust. I think the other concern, though, that I've seen with people who use really giant IEC cables, not so much ones that are $100, but I've seen some guys like retrofit really huge IEC ends to existing cables. The weight of those can sometimes be problematic to the jacks on the back of your supply. And I've actually seen Strymon supplies in particular where the whole IEC jack just comes out because the weight of the plug is so heavy that it puts a lot of stress on it. So I would say if you're getting anything around 16 gauge IEC cable, I'd say 16 to 18 gauge is going to be totally fine for this. The best, cheapest, and I'm trying to find it, the best, cheapest IEC cable that I've ever bought that I still use to this day is this medical grade one. And it's a hospital cord. Here it is right here. I'm going to share my screen. Got it on Amazon for $32. And I mostly just got it because it's so robust. If you're listening to this, you're going to have to imagine this beautiful hospital grade cord.
Oh, look at that handle.
Got a nice robust end.
Look at that.
And you can get it in different lengths.
Different colors even.
Different colors. Yeah, if you were so inclined. I just have the black, and you can even get it up to 75 feet if you're ever that far away from your power outlet. And this one is actually really nice and very robust. So it's $32. It's C2G power cord, hospital grade cord, ideal for medical carts and mobile devices. 14 gauge.
Can I ask you guys a serious question though, along IEC cables and robustness? Have you guys ever had one fail?
No,
I have never once and I've got a whole bunch of different types in the shop. Like just if they come into the shop and for whatever reason with a product, I just chuck it in a box and I use whatever's there. Never once in my life have I ever had an IEC cable fail, cheap or expensive. And so, I mean, as far as just that one particular thing, spend more money because it will last longer. Firstly, I've never had one fail. Secondly, if I ever did have one fail, they are the most common cable you can find. You can go steal it off your parents' computer monitor and chuck it into your pedalboard. You're good to go. Like it's not a 5-pin MIDI cable or some unique, hard to come by. It's so common. And so that's where I'm thinking about all this. Like I struggle to justify spending money on that when it could go into patch cables on my board, or it could go into upgrading some other area of my pedal board. I think IEC cable would be the bottom of my list as far as upgrades go.
And most power supplies, when you get one, as long as you get it new, usually come with a cable.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I have like 15 of them in my drawer. But I've only had like 2 power
If you get a
supplies.
setup with Omilion, you do not get the power cable.
Well, I did a setup for one guy, and it was a total accident in the heat of the moment of packing, because when I pack up a board, I like saran wrap it or plastic wrap it like really tight, and I like make it all. It looks like a
No aluminum
big old
foil,
pack.
huh?
No aluminum foil. No, it looks like, and I use brown tape, so it like looks like drugs basically.
Yep.
It's I always tell people, I'm like, it's a board, and I had one guy. He's like, hey, can you send me a power cable? And I was like, oh, did I forget? He goes, yeah. I'm like, here, just use the one you have until I get it to you. He goes, oh, I don't have one. And I was like, you don't have one? He goes, well, I have one for my guitar amp, but I don't have one for my board. I was like, how do you not have one for an extra? How do you not have an extra one laying around? I was like, screw it. I'm going to send you like 3 extras. And I like opened up my drawer. And I'm like, oh, okay. And most of them still have the twisty ties on them. But it's I got to ask though, am I the only, is it a common thing for the call these cables IEC cables? Because anytime I say IEC to someone goes, what is that? And I'm like,
That's what I call
like a printer cable. Oh, those 3-prong cables, printer cable. I'm like, yeah. An IEC cable. They're like, oh, yeah, I don't know what an IEC cable. I don't know. I always thought that was interesting. People would always be super confused. I'm like, am I calling it? Have I been calling it the wrong name all these years?
No, that's all I call it. Or some people call it, is it C13, C14, something like that. I think that refers to the ends.
Yeah.
But I always call them IECs.
Yes, the International Electrotechnical Commission.
Is that actually it? Or are you making this up?
No, I remember it was like international. I thought it was electrical commission, but it's electrotechnical commission.
Okay.
Refers to a type of electronic cable that meets the International Electrotechnical Commission standards.
Ugh.
So we're all in compliance.
And here I thought it was ingenious electrical cord this whole time.
Ingenious.
And I was always very wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
So is it considered an IETC? Right?
Electrotechnical is one word.
Oh, oh, wow. Okay.
A lot of long words in that acronym. That's impressive.
So if anybody wants to get that tattooed, they have our blessing
across their whole back, because it'll take that much space.
It has to be like a chest tat. I'm doing like in multiple layers. Oh my
and
gosh.
Instead of a snake wrapping around your arm all the way down to your hand, it can just be one big IEC cable.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Well, I think that this is a great place, though. Sorry, Grant, go ahead. I was going to suggest this is a great place for us to wrap up.
Yeah, I was just going to say all that to say, I don't think I would ever spend $100 on an IC cable for tone improvement purposes.
And if anybody on the Electrotechnical Commission, I know it's international, and we have some good representation here. Between Canada and America, if anybody wants to give us an invite, we'll consider it. I'm not saying that we'll accept, but
gotta weigh up our options.
Yeah, we'll consider it. So if for all of you on the International Electrotechnical Commission, we're happy to weigh in and maybe give our opinions on $100 IEC cables.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
love it.
All right. Well, until next time, we'll pull over to the side of the road on our way to Tone Town and take a breather. And we'll see everybody next week.
See you guys.
See you guys.